Hello, happy Thursday. Happy Thursday. Oops, that's a camera. Trying to give some people some more time. What time is it? Good evening. Hey, Letitia. How are you today? Happy Thursday. If you're just joining, happy Thursday. Happy Thursday. So tonight we're talking about triggers. We're on episode 9. Next week will be the last episode that I will do talking about healing in a series like this. So tonight, triggers. You know, those moments when you might slip back into something that you thought you was over, right? So I want to just remind you before I start talking that being triggered doesn't mean you haven't healed. That's not what it means. It means God is still shining the light in a part of you that still needs work, right? So tonight we're going to unpack that and how to recognize triggers, how to respond to them, and how to actually strengthen your growth instead of derail it. And while we're talking about this, is because, like I said, when it comes to healing, triggers they're unavoidable, right? You're usually going to come across triggers at some point, and I don't think it ever stops. You just have to learn how to respond to them differently. So we're just going to be talking about, like, if you have those questions like, why does this still bother me? Or I thought I was over this. And the enemy will use that to try to plant shame and condemnation or guilt. But here's the truth. Like I said, triggers are signals, not setbacks. And they just reveal the places, like I said earlier, that need attention. And they invite us to bring them to God so we can work through them properly. So the first key point will be triggers are messengers, not measurements of failure. So being triggered doesn't mean you're failing or that you haven't healed. And I'll say that for some people, because some people haven't even been doing the work, haven't even attempted to try to figure out some self-discovery or some self-growth. So they're always going to be triggered, right? They're always going to live in a state of offense. But I'm talking to the people who are on a journey trying to get there or who are already on the journey. So being triggered doesn't mean you're failing or that you haven't healed. Triggers are messengers. They reveal places in your heart or past that still need attention. So basically, it's still like a root there, and the root needs to come up, right? So they aren't meant to shame you, but they're there to help you grow awareness and maturity. Because if you don't know what's triggering you, how are you going to heal? You need to know what it is and what inside of you is causing you to feel the way that you do, right? Every time you notice a trigger, you have an opportunity to respond with wisdom rather than react out of old pain. And recognizing this change, recognizing this changes how you experience those moments, and it brings freedom instead of frustration. Because when you don't know how to deal with triggers, it's like it keeps you in a prison. You're in a prison somewhere, and whatever is triggering you has a hold on you. That's why I say it's like a root. You got to get to the root in order to uproot it, to pull it up out of you, right? So, like I said, they revealed unhealed areas. And like I said, the people who are not doing the work, they're not even going to see their progress. So this will strictly reveal unhealed areas, not a lack of progress. Okay? Sensitivity doesn't equal weakness. Sensitivity doesn't mean that you're not doing what you're supposed to, right? You're going to be sensitive. Triggers are invitations to awareness. Your response matters more than the trigger itself. It's not the trigger, it's how you respond to it. It's just like your circumstances don't define you, how you respond to it does. Everything that you do in life is how you respond to it. Usually starts with your wiring and how your brain is set up. It's how you respond to everything. So think about like you having a scar. The skin may be healed, but it's still tender underneath. That tenderness doesn't mean you're unhealed. It means the part of you, that part just needs a little bit more TLC, right? It's the same thing when you're triggered by something. So drop in the chat, I'm learning to listen to my triggers. Because like I said, if you don't know what the trigger is, how are you going to move forward in healing? So drop in the chat, I'm learning to listen to my triggers. So the second part will be your reaction. Your reaction reveals what's still rooted. This is what I said earlier. Triggers are a root. Our reactions often reveal old wounds, fears, or unresolved emotions, trauma. That's where your triggers are coming from. When a trigger shows up, it's a window into something that God wants to bring healing to. Okay? Understanding why you react the way you do is a part of walking in freedom. If you don't understand it, you're not going to be free. So whatever trigger it is always going to have power over you until you can face it and get it out, right? The more you recognize your patterns, the more you can pause before responding, invite God into the situation. So your reactions and how you respond to whatever is triggering you shows your unsolved patterns and your pain, right? It's kind of like how when they say hurt people. You're hurting somebody else because you're hurt. And that's not right. You have to get to the root. You have to figure out why you are responding and acting the way that you act. Because I would say back in the day, and I ain't gonna even say just necessarily back in the day, God was still working on me in certain areas. Like I used to match energy with people, but matching energy with people is just not the way to go, right? Because why would I basically mirror somebody that's, operating lower than I am? If I'm up here, if I carry myself a certain way, if I have, wisdom and all the necessary tools, I'm very mature, why would I come down here and match somebody else's energy? That's the same thing when it comes to responding. It's not always, sometimes you don't need to respond. So, and when you do and you continue to do it, it shows a pattern. A pattern becomes a cycle, especially if it's negative. So like I said, reactions show unsolved patterns or pain. Triggers expose old wounds, not create new ones. Most of the time when you're responding, it's because you have a wound. You have a wound that's not healed. Awareness of your reaction is evidence of growth. When you can get to that point, or like I just said, you're not going to match energy, then like you have gotten to a certain point in your healing journey. And you can always ask God about your reaction before responding, because it'll help you respond wisely. And I'm going to speak on that because last night I was watching Bible study and my pastor was preaching about selective silence. And it's crazy that I'm doing a live kind of similar, but he was saying selective silence based out of Proverbs chapter 26 verses 4 and 5. So if I can remember off the top of my head, the scripture was basically saying, do not respond to a fool's folly or you'll become just like them. But the second verse was like, respond to the fool's folly and they'll become wise in their own eyes. So basically he was saying like, the first part of that is when you respond, you become just like the person. So it goes back to like what I'm saying. So when you're triggered, however they're treating you, you're going to be just like them. But verse 5 is basically saying like, you learn how to like tweak your response. And most of the time when you tweak your response, it kind of plants a seed in them, right? You can go watch it online. Dr. Darius, it was called Word Wars, Selective Silence. So like I said, you can't respond to everything. It has to get to a point where you have to learn how to shut your mouth, because you're always going to be fighting fire with fire, and it's always going to bring you down. Like, it's literally going to bring you down, and then you might start feeling like, oh, well, I thought I healed and I thought that I was better than this, which you are better than this, but you still haven't figured out a way to not respond to something that wants you to respond. And it's just like the enemy. If he could trick you out your spot, he's going to do it every time. So an example would be if someone ignores your message and it instantly makes you upset and you feel like you gotta go send 1,000 messages, blow up somebody's phone and talk that crap to them, you got some work to do, right? Or on the other hand, if you send a text and somebody don't reply, they ignore you, it could make you feel unworthy. And that you feeling unworthy is tied to a trigger that you have had in the past, because them not responding has nothing to do with you. But until you get to a certain point in growth, you're always going to think somebody not responding to you has something to do with you when it doesn't, right? So what's one reaction you've noticed that shows you something about yourself? You can type it in the chat. You can say like what your trigger is. Like, let's say something that happened this week. What's something that you noticed about yourself when it comes to reaction? You can type it in the chat, or you could just journal it. So the third point will be, when people trigger you, respond with wisdom. Because sometimes the trigger is going to come from your parents, your kids, your spouse, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your coworker, your friend. In those moments, it's easy to react in anger and frustration or hurt. That's human nature. But God wants us to get to a point where we start responding with grace and wisdom. And sometimes it takes a lot to not chew somebody apart. Trust me. That doesn't mean that you ignore boundaries or you pretend that it's okay. That's not what that means. It just means that you're pausing and you're thinking about what you're going to say. You're thinking about basically you're thinking about what war you're about to engage in. So it's just like, do I want to continue going in war when I don't have to? Because you're showing up to the war with the same weapons as them. So it's just like, how can you beat somebody at their own game? So it means you just pause, you pray, and you choose how to respond rather than letting the trigger control you. Like I said earlier, every time you fall into a trigger is some type of control there. Until you can find out what the trigger is, face it and address it, you're always going to be in a prison with that trigger. So if it's a person that can control your emotions, they're going to control your emotions every time until you learn how to not be controlled by that trigger. So responding well might look like calmly communicating your feelings. It might look like you walking out. It might look like setting healthy boundaries. Again, I've told y'all, boundaries are for you, not the other person. They're for you. And also taking a moment to yourself before reacting. This is good. A very good word for you. Thank you. So, pause before reacting. That allows the Holy Spirit to guide your response. And I would say with me, over time, I figured out that I feel like a lot of people struggle with the spirit of offense. Like, means you get offended by stuff, and everybody deals with that. Also, I used to have like anger really bad, and I didn't know where it was coming from, but I know there was a person who I kind of was dealing with that was very unhealed, didn't get the nurturing and the care that they needed as a child, so they just grow up to be a traumatized, unhealed, broken adult. So that started to bring out anger in me that I didn't even know existed, and God had to basically tell me that anger, like the person was basically feeding on that because they had their own demons that they was fighting with. So if it could get me to engage in a fight, I had already lost. And so after a while, I would get to the point where I would get convicted. When I was about to say something, I would get convicted. It would be like this little voice, or it would be this feeling. I would always know when I'm about to do something that I'm not supposed to when it comes to that response with that person, because my chest would just get on. It would feel like it was fire sitting in my chest. So I started to learn, like, hey, like, this is not cool. You know, I got to excuse myself from the situation because I don't want to be this person. I don't want to fight fire with fire. And if this person is being used by the enemy, all I'm doing is allowing the enemy to use me too. And that's not what's supposed to be going on. So, like I said, the Holy Spirit will guide your response. After a while, I got to that point, like I said, that I couldn't really engage in it. And then I just wouldn't. And then, like I said, I would get convicted. So boundaries are healthy and they protect your emotional space. Like I said, boundaries are for you. They're not for the other person. If you don't have any boundaries, people are going to walk all over you. That's just how it is. If you don't have any boundaries for your life, people are going to treat you any kind of way because you don't respect yourself. That's basically what it is. Like, I don't allow people to treat me any kind of way. I'll say something like, hey, like, you ain't about to talk to me. But at this point in my life, you're not even going to get the chance for me to say that to you. You're just going to be cut off, right? I have boundaries in place for my own life. I don't let people do what they want to me. Because if they can do what they want to me, that means they control me. How do you handle people that know your triggers and poke at them? So when you know people who trigger you on purpose, you have to remove yourself. You have to remove yourself because it's a bad spot to be in because they know what really sets you off. So since they know and they poke at it, it just kind of gives to me like the enemy is using you. They're using you against me. And if I keep engaging with you, I'm going to keep, feeling the way that I'm feeling. I'm going to keep being drained, or whatever you're going through. You're just going to keep going through it because this person has control over you. So you have to remove yourself from the situation. You have to remove yourself from the situation, or you're just going to have to learn how to uproot that trigger and let whatever they're triggering in you, you're going to have to heal it. So that's basically like, let's say like, okay, you've done the work to heal that trigger. If the person tried to poke at you again, it wouldn't bother you because you've already done the work. So if you're still struggling in that area, you need to find out what the trigger is and you need to like work at it. So they can't basically use it against you. But at the same time, also removing yourself completely if they know the trigger and they do it on purpose. Because when people know your triggers and they do it on purpose, they just want to get a reaction out of you. Every time you respond, it costs you something. It don't cost them nothing. That's why they're doing it. But they love to see you get riled up. It's some men who love to see women just cuss them out and do things. Blow their phone up, act crazy. That's not cute. You got to get to the point where you better than that. It's not cute. And that's why some people just go around like, it's almost like they suck all of that up and then they go around just triggering people because that's what they like. But it cost you something. It costed you something when you responded. So it takes time, but you always want to think about, and like I said, if the Holy Spirit or God hasn't convicted you, the more you work at it, you'll be convicted. You won't respond. And then it's just like, when I know what kind of person I'm dealing with, I'm not finna respond, because when I don't respond, I kill you. I kill whatever is inside of you because you're feeding off my reaction. You got to get in people's head a little bit, right? If I know that you want me to respond, why am I going to respond? Because that's what you want me to do. And then you're beating me in your own game. You're going to lose every time. Literally, you're going to lose every time. So, what did I say? Boundaries are healthy and they protect your emotional space. So that was basically me saying it's going to cost you something when you don't have boundaries. Communicating calmly helps reduce conflict and misunderstanding. So if you're trying to say something to somebody, they yelling and you yelling, can't nobody hear nothing. You got to fix your tone sometimes. I had to learn that too. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. Choosing to pray instead of react brings peace to your heart. Some people, like me, sometimes I'll pray before I'm about to take it there. And I'll be like, God, you better get them before I do. That be my little prayer sometimes. I don't go all into detail. It be like, God, you better get them before I do. You got to pray. You got to step away. You got to say something. Get yourself together. So an example would be if your spouse or boyfriend, girlfriend says something that triggers insecurity within you. Instead of snapping back, you could take a moment to breathe, pray, and then respond with clarity rather than frustration. So think of one person who triggers you. How can you respond differently this week instead of reacting immediately? You can write it in the chat or you can journal it. I would hope you would journal it because, like I said, if you don't know the trigger, you're going to keep being in the cycle. You have to break free from the cycle. Because even if you are in a cycle with whatever it is, if you don't figure out what it is, you're going to always be in a cycle, and you can go from person to situation to whatever it is, and you're still going to be in a cycle because you have not done the work and you have not gotten to the bottom of it. You have to get to the root of the problem. It's always the root. It's always the root. You can't, it's just like cutting, let's say like something is growing up out of the ground. You just cutting the top off. It could grow back. You got to get to the root. You got to get to the root. So the fourth point will be healing teaches you to respond, not react. Triggers are not always avoidable. I said this in the beginning. But how we respond is always a choice. That's always a choice on the table. You don't have to respond. Sometimes you don't have to respond at all. And sometimes no response is the best response. Healing doesn't mean the trigger won't show up. Because like I said, triggers are going to show up throughout life. It's just a part of life. You just have to learn how to handle it differently. Over time, you begin to notice the trigger, process it, and respond in a way that honors God, yourself, and others. Because once you get to that point where you are honoring yourself, you feel free. It shows emotional maturity. It shows spiritual wisdom. Because you're not reacting from pain. You're not reacting from trauma. You're not reacting from hurt. You're not reacting from insecurity. A lot of the times when we react negatively, like I said, it's a wound, it's trauma, it's something there that has not been healed. A lot of times people respond from unforgiveness. Unforgiveness is a root. Unforgiveness is a very bad place to be because everything in your life will just bleed over. And a lot of people don't know why they respond the way they do or they go through the things the way that they do. And when you go back to it, 9 times out of 10, unforgiveness is sitting there somewhere, right? So healing changes your response. It does not change the trigger itself. It will never change the trigger. It will change how you react to it. But pausing before responding is emotional and spiritual maturity. Like I said, you can feel strongly without letting it control your actions. And I'm not gonna lie, it takes a lot of work to not let something have control over you. But once you get to the point where like, oh, this was controlling me, you know how to maneuver through it. Let's see. So point 5, I'm trying to scroll to my notes. Understanding triggers strengthens your growth. So triggers are your teachers. Every time you notice one, write it down. Pray about it. Invite God into the moment because you'll grow stronger. Everything is crazy. I kind of rewrote the same stuff. So naming your triggers, understanding their root, and responding wisely allows you to see the patterns in your life. I'm going to say that again. Naming your trigger, understanding the root. Where did it come from? Where did it come from? Where did it come from? And responding wisely allows you to see patterns in your life. Over time, triggers lose their power to control you, and instead they become tools for maturity, freedom, and healing. Self-awareness improves emotional regulation. Emotional regulation takes some work. And you have to learn how to, sometimes you're going to have to take it to the chin. It's been plenty of times where stuff happened to me and I wanted to spaz out, or I didn't deserve it. I had to take it to the chin and I just had to process it and deal with it. Yeah, it wasn't fun to deal with and feel what I felt, but emotional regulation is how I can get to be at a certain point in my life where it's not like I let it slide, but it's like I let it slide, if that makes sense. And emotional regulation is very important to have, because responding is going to always cost you something. It's just like if you're on the internet and somebody is trying to, I don't know, tarnish your character or whatever the situation is, natural human response is to want to bite back. But let's say you don't know who is watching you. You don't know. It could be somebody who wants to work with you or a business deal or something. That's why I say you always have to be careful with how you respond. Because when you respond, it's going to cost you something. You don't know, somebody could have been watching you and you posted that going off, and then boom, somebody could have had a brand deal or wanted to work with you or invite you somewhere, and then you done stepped out of character. So learning to regulate your emotions is very important. And like I said, when it comes to men, some men thrive on you being emotionally unregulated. And then sometimes it might not just be men, it could be other people in general. They just thrive off you being chaotic. They thrive off you being dysfunctional, because that's what that basically is. When your emotions are all over the place, you're just going to be a mess. You got to get to the point where you can control yourself. Like I said, naming your triggers decreases their power over you. Recognizing patterns helps you avoid unnecessary conflict. Most of the time when you are triggered by something, it's a pattern. It hasn't just happened once. It's happened and you keep falling into the loop. So there is a pattern. You need to figure out what that pattern is. Growth happens when triggers become lessons, not chains. So your trigger can become your lesson when you know what the trigger is. Until you figure out what the trigger is, where it came from, you're going to be in chains. Whatever is triggering you, like I said, is always going to have control over you. It's like you're a prisoner. You're a prisoner somewhere. And until you get to the point, you're going to be in chains, right? The goal is to be free. Noticing, okay, so I wrote an example. Noticing that criticism triggers insecurity. Instead of reacting, journal it and pray for a perspective. Pray for a different perspective. Because if somebody, let's say, if somebody says something to you, or let's say you're a person who, I don't know, struggles with, let's say, your self-image, and when you see other people who, embody themselves, if that triggers you, you need to figure out why. I basically would have told you. So if you struggle with self-image, that's your trigger. So when you see other people embodying themselves, your trigger is, like, I'm gonna say the trigger. The root is self-image. Somewhere, some way, something happened with your self-esteem, your self-worth. So when you see other people confident and all of this type of stuff, it triggers you because you're insecure. Now, I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm saying that in a way so you can recognize. That's just an example. You're struggling with self-identity. It all falls under identity. But if you wanted to just say, write something down, it'll be like, oh, well, I struggle with my self-image. When I see so-and-so or other people do this, it makes me feel this way. That's an example of you writing down the trigger, where it comes from. And then you could ask somebody who has wisdom, or I don't know, maybe look it up online and see what you could do to combat that. So if I was to give you an example on how to combat that, I would basically tell you to figure out, like, why do you feel that way about yourself? Like, why do you feel that way about yourself? And then whatever you see somebody else doing that makes you feel the way that you do, make yourself look the part, right? You have to pour into yourself, especially if you're struggling with self-identity or image. That was just an example that I gave. So, journal prompts. I always give journal prompts before I go. So you'll list 3 triggers you've noticed recently. Number 2 will be, what does each trigger reveal about your past pain or your current growth? List 3 triggers you've noticed recently, and what does each trigger reveal about your past pain or current growth? Number 3 will be, how can you pause and respond differently next time? What can you do next time? Number 4 will be, what forgiveness, because then I talk about unforgiveness. What forgiveness or release is God asking you to extend in this season? If you struggle with unforgiveness, like I said, it's going to bleed into a lot of areas into your life until you get to the root of the unforgiveness. A lot of the times is why you're being triggered somewhere. Somewhere, some way, something happened to you and you never healed. You became bitter, because that's where it's unforgiveness, then it turns into bitterness, then it turns into resentment. So then you'll be thinking you're healed or whatever it is. You go through life and then you find yourself triggered by something. 9 times out of 10, unforgiveness is like one of the main roots that you need to pull up. So that's why I said, what forgiveness or release is God asking you to extend in this season? And so number 5 would be, how can you allow triggers to strengthen your emotional and spiritual growth? Let me see if anybody. Okay. So remember, triggers aren't your enemy. They're just your teachers. It's just a mirror being held up to you. It's basically a mirror. It's showing you what's inside of you that still needs work. You're not going to be able to run from triggers. You just got to learn how to respond and react differently. Because your trigger only defines you based on how you respond to it. Right? Every time you pause, you reflect, and you invite God into the moment, you grow stronger, you grow wiser, and you're freer. Healing isn't a straight line. And being triggered doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're learning, especially if you're trying to learn. I'm going to have to add that in there. Because some people just walk through life just triggered and just stuck in offense mode. Them people just different. But when you're trying to figure out, why is this triggering me? Then I can say you're not failing. It means you're learning. So you need to journal this stuff. You need to write these things down. Because like I always say, you cannot go through life just hearing it. You have to apply it, right? That's what turns knowledge into wisdom. I mean, I have the gift of wisdom naturally, always been like this. But a lot of this extra stuff too, I learned from my lessons. Because if you do not learn your lesson, it's going to continue to repeat, which keeps you in a cycle. Don't matter what you do, who you meet, and where you go. That same test going to keep coming back around until you get it. Until you get it. So if you got to keep going through years of whatever you're going through, you're going to go through years of whatever you're going through because you have not learned your lesson. You have not figured out the root. And I didn't make the rules. That's just how life goes. So you need to write it down. Because like I said, if you don't know what it is, you can't help yourself. So you put yourself in a bad spot. You put yourself in a spot to where you keep feeling the way that you feel and going through the things that you're going through because you don't know what the issue is. You always have to get down to the root of a thing. So make sure you journal and you write it down and you reflect and you let God show you the lessons hidden in your triggers. Please. Because your triggers, like I said, they don't define you unless you let them. You let them have control over you, they will. If you let a person have control of you, they will. Right? I'm trying to see if I hit everything in my notes. So I hope this word bless somebody, because triggers is a part of life. And you got to know how to deal with them. You got to know how to deal with them. And that's how you also know too, like, you learned your lesson in something. It's because when it come back around, you won't respond the same way. When you continue responding the same way, you have not learned and you still got work to do. So like I said, it's the same cycle. It's like the guinea pig on the wheel. You just keep going and going and going and going and going and going until you decide to face whatever it is and break free. And if the enemy know that you don't know what's triggering you or what's wrong with you, he's going to keep having a field day with you. And that means ultimately you're giving him more power. He don't even have no power. It's because you don't know your authority. You gotta get to the root of it. That's the only way you're gonna heal, truly. And that's in whatever it is. You gotta get to the root. Because healing is not just posting quotes and just posting scriptures and just literally just listening to somebody talk. Yes, you can hear me talk all day, but what are you doing? Are you applying the message? Because if you're not, then what I always say, nothing changes if nothing changes. It's just like when you were in school. They give you all the information that you need. And then at the end of the course or the term, you got to take that test. Most of the time, when you take that test and you don't fail, you fail the class. Same thing with your lessons and your triggers. If you don't know, you ain't learned, you're going to have to keep taking that test over and over and over and over and over. So, write it down. Please write it down. Write it down. Once you start writing stuff down, you start really doing some deep reflection. Because when you write stuff down, it just allows you to see like, dang, like this is what I've been struggling with, or this is what I've been carrying. Then you'll start to dig a little deeper, and then it'll spark curiosity in you to want to change and to want to be better. But like I said, you have to know what it is. You have to address it. You have to face it. And a lot of the times when people say you need to face yourself, that's basically what it means. You need to write down things that trigger you, since we're talking about triggers. Write it down. Understand why it's making you feel the way that you do. Write down what you're doing when you're triggered. How are you responding? How are you acting? And that will give you like the first step to start doing the healing work, because you are aware of what it is. So I hope this message blessed somebody. Share it with somebody who needs encouragement. Listen to it over if you got to. If you have not gotten one of my journals, please get you one. It will change your life. Writing things down will change your life. Does anybody have any questions? Somebody said good morning, y'all, from this side. That was a good word. And does anybody have anything they want to say before I get off of here? I'm trying to check the comments. don't see any comments. I be trying to look before I get off, because sometimes when I get off, I'll see comments. So next week is the last part to the healing room. I try to hit the main things in healing that could jumpstart a lot of people's healing. I haven't figured out what I'm gonna talk about for the last episode, but after that, I'll just be going down the list of when I asked people a few months ago what they wanted me to talk about, because somebody wanted me to talk about healing, so that's why I've been talking about it. I got a lot to talk about, because it's a lot that God has gave me that I had to go through to talk about. So we'll get there. But since nobody has nothing to say, I'm gonna get off of here. I will see you guys next Thursday. Same time, same place. Have a blessed and safe weekend. See y'all next week. Bye.